Okay, on the whiteboard, just for illustration purposes, I'll try basically divide this into two sections just to elaborate like some critical points that we have to work with for our logical reasoning in this part. So I've dotted this down as like 1, and I've dotted 2 over on this side as well. So basically, as I was explaining, there's 2 parts to this area, whereas we're now dealing with mainly non-taxable supplies, That's basically where we are. We're dealing with mainly non-taxable supplies. So for our logical reasoning to basically kick in, just to basically have a basis from which to work from, we know that there's one part so far as the going concern part is concerned, which is basically a taxable, let's call it, a taxable supply. There's one part which is taxable supply. I'll put SCF supply, and there's one part that is non-taxable supply. So I'll put none, and I'll put TS over here. Okay, so we know that there's also the implication of the seller. Okay, let's make that one part above the other, and we make this the buyer as well. We have to basically try talking in isolation from the seller and the buyer. We basically have to try see if we can individually just discuss their actual positions. So when you're talking about the taxable supply side and it applies to the seller, what happens there? So there we know that the seller will be selling the taxable supply side as a zero-rated supply, right? So it will be zero-rated. So I'll put it to be zero-rated there. Seems like alright, about markers are running out. Okay, so I'm going to put zero-rated supply, so zero-rated supply. Zero-rated, sorry, in terms of the actual. But while we're dealing with taxable supplies, so therefore there won't be any VAT implications. So there will not be no VAT for the taxable supply side. No VAT implications. Right? We still look at the seller. When it comes to the non-taxable supply side, what are the implications there? So now, suddenly, because we're talking about non-taxable supply side, and this is from the seller's perspective, is that suddenly now, because it's mainly non-taxable, SARS now wants him to actually levy out an output VAT, because that's seen to be an outright sale. It's in the majority. I would imagine that's how they look at it. So now there are implications for him. He must now charge the VAT output on the taxable supply side. So there's VAT output for him. Now, so because there's VAT output for him for a supply that he never used to claim VAT for before, that there's a bit of injustice, right, for the poor guy. So SARS is like, okay, cool, we'll give you a bit of a relief. You can process like a change in use adjustment. So then there'll be VAT here for him to claim in terms of the change in use adjustment. Change in use adjustment. So put in change in use AD. Right? So that's his position basically. That's the seller's position. Now moving over to the buyer. In terms of what he paid for the actual taxable portion, then he basically paid 0 for it, because in terms of the VAT outflow, the VAT cash flow, he paid 0 for it. So as well, there would have not been VAT, because we also follow that same logic in saying basically the buyer, where it was 0 rated supply, you'd be basically like following the cash flow that the actual seller would have basically levied. So in this instance, there was no VAT that he had to pay. So that's why we basically put it on like no VAT for him. Right? Fine. So now we're coming to the side of non-taxable supply. What has happened here for the buyer in terms of the non-taxable supply side? What has happened to him? So now, because of this, he's now paid VAT output for that. He's basically paid VAT for that. So basically we're going to say he paid VAT for it. Paid VAT for that. So he was vetted for that, basically. And because he was vetted, there's a bit of injustice for him, because he's not in the same position like the seller to process change in use adjustment. He can't do that at this point in time. So for him, that is the disadvantage that he temporarily has to basically carry on his shoulders until such a time when he'd sell the actual business. That is the only time when he'd be able to also process a change in use adjustment. Though he's also paid VAT over here, which arises as a consequence of this VAT output that was levied by the actual seller. So these are the principles that we just basically want us to be working with as we're going through and unpacking, part 3 of this last part of going concern. I hope this makes sense, and we'll get through to the next phase of where we want to get through to.